it would be pretty cool to build a demo of a computer that felt like a human, but instead of you texting with it, you're talking to it. So I built this demo pairing kind of our technology and GPT together, tweeted it out, and I'm like, I'm going viral for sure. My first time ever. I'm so excited for it. And then like barely anybody noticed.
No way.
So I went to this like 5-hour long lunch with them. They were like, can we buy you? Can we license? Or we're going to kill you. They offered us this super lowball offer. And we're like, no. And they're like, well, if you have an AI idea, then like we'll 10X the offer. I'm like, I don't have a way. We're like a live streaming company, video conferencing. I can't.
Oh God.
Sorry, guys. I get an email from OpenAI and it's like, hey, so we signed up for a LiveKit Cloud in secret with a personal Gmail address 3 weeks ago. And we've built this voice interface ChatGPT like on top of you guys, and now we're like fans and we want to like talk commercial. What was really interesting is that right when voice mode launched, OpenAI like put this meeting on our calendar, and we go into this meeting and they're like, so how do we scale this thing? No joke. My answer was, you're OpenAI. Why are you asking me? In the early days, a Salesforce came to me and they were like, so first question, who do you guys work with? Who do you guys power? Like, can you handle our scale? I'm like, oh, well, we power ChatGPT. We're like, all right, next question.
Done.
That's product market fit.
Product market fit.
Product market fit.
I called it the product market fit question.
Product market fit.
Product market fit.
Product market fit.
Product market fit.
I mean, the name of the show is Product Market Fit.
Do you think the Product Market Fit show has product market fit? Because if you do, then there's something you just have to do. You have to take out your phone. You have to leave the show 5 stars. It lets us reach more founders and it lets us get better guests. Thank you.
Russ, welcome to the show, man.
Pablo, thanks so much for having me, dude.
You've been having a wild ride, not just at your startup LiveKit, just raised a big Series B, 45 million last year. And then you're just mentioning you had twins. Like how long ago was that?
They're actually 3 months old today. So they're still pretty fresh. I'm still in the newborn trenches.
Well, congrats, man. Having one kid is a big deal. Having twins and a startup at the same time must be just absolute insanity.
That's right. Raised 45 mil, raising 2 girls at the same time. Yeah, it is pretty wild. I feel I've done like more adulting in the last 12 months than like any person ever.
Oh man, that's crazy. So we'll get into the story here at LiveKit, which started about 5 years ago, I guess in 2021. But maybe a little bit of background, because I know you had some other startups before that. So maybe tell us a bit about kind of your history and maybe a little, even more about that. Exactly, the previous startup, right? EV Labs.
Yeah. So this is my 5th company. The first one that's really kind of started to do well. But I grew up always wanting to start a company. My dad was in tech startups in the 80s and 90s during semiconductors and GPUs and DSL and all of these kind of foundational technology shifts, mostly on the hardware side. And, I got out of school and I'm like, I'm going to start a company. So I went and I joined Y Combinator, the 2007 class of Y Combinator. So it was the 5th batch. Did a company then. And, I was a kid right out of school. And actually most of the founders at that time were just kids out of school.
That's the OG, YC. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely OG batch. You don't see many pre-2010 founders still going to like the YC alumni events. So it's always kind of a shock for people when I run into them there and they see my name tag and the batch that I was in. But that's also where I met my co-founder of LiveKit. It's also where I met my co-founder. I mean, it's the same co-founder from EV Labs. So, we met way back almost 20 years ago in that YC batch doing separate companies. And then I've kind of, in particular, always sort of done a company and then oscillated to joining a company. I feel like when you do a company, you kind of like get tunnel vision. You're super focused on this thing that you're building and trying to solve this one problem. And then you don't really like pay attention to what else is happening like outside of that one problem you're trying to solve. And so I like to go and join a company for a while, take a bit of a breather and get a better lay of the land and what's changed and what's new and what are the new opportunities coming up. So I've done that. I went back to 23andMe after my YSC company when 23andMe was really small, this genetics company. And then I went to Twitter and I was the 75th employee at Twitter, working on a lot of cool stuff there. Left, started a company. That one failed. And then I started another company and that was EV. And EV was kind of we pivoted many times, but it was in like the content recommendation space using machine learning or deep learning at that time to recommend content and sold it to Medium, the blogging platform.
It was like an algorithm that you would white label to other websites that had content, or where was it leveraged?
Yeah, exactly. It was more like we had kind of two different products. We had like an end user product of that was integrated across all Android devices on Verizon phones. So we had a lot of users, and it was replacing Google Now. So like when you swipe right on iOS, that was Siri. On Android, that used to be Google Now. But for Verizon devices, we were actually instead that screen, and we would deliver content there. You could read like news articles, and we would figure out how to recommend more content to you, kind of like a news feed, but we would also sell the recommendation API or service for other companies to use to recommend their content. Then we sold it to Medium, and LiveKit started after that, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
How big did EV get, like, revenue wise, employee wise, high level?
Yeah, EV got to about 14 people, I think, at peak. When we sold the company, it was maybe like 11 or something like that. So not too big. We raised about $13 million across a couple of rounds, a seed and an A. And then revenue wise, revenue, we never really figured out. That's actually part of the reason that we ended up going and selling the company and deciding to stop working on it was we had a lot of users. We had about 2.5 million DAUs on that product,
Oh, wow.
right?
Okay.
Daily actives on it across both our direct to user product that was in the App Store, and then also through this integration with Verizon, and across both, yeah, total about 2.5 million DAU. So a lot of users, but we just couldn't figure out how to monetize it. We decided to try to use ad networks, and like cost per install was this thing that like Facebook had like a really strong cost per install. We thought we could replicate that, get the same kind of CPI, but we were beholden to using Verizon's ad networks that they had acquired, and they're just much worse at targeting. And there's not enough contextual data in just a news feed versus like all the information Facebook has about you from a demographic perspective. And so we just couldn't extract the same level of revenue. I think we got to about 1 million in ARR from that. But,
And was it like a good exit or more of like an acquihire situation? Like what was kind of the dynamics of it?
yeah, so that was, we actually had started to try to sell the company, and we kind of lost our passion for it. It wasn't looking like we could build a strong business off of a pretty large user base. And so we initially started with looking for an acquihire. So we like hired a banker, and we thought like, okay, maybe a banker will help us facilitate something better than an acquihire. At the same time, we'll go talk to companies.
We can actually take some time on this tangent because, this idea like great companies are bought, not sold, blah, blah, blah. And it's true. But when you have a company that for whatever reason isn't, either you're not passionate anymore or isn't working to the level you want it to, like, what can you actively do to sell your company is not at all well understood. Frankly, I don't feel like I have a playbook either. Like it is a bit of a dark side. So I'm really curious, exactly what you did and ultimately what worked.
Yeah, I think a few interesting kind of experiences and learnings that came from that. So like, I think the first one is, everyone's like, okay, you want to sell your company, you got to go get a banker. So like we got a banker, right?
Classic.
Yeah, classic. And so we went and we found this banker through some referrals of friends that had sold companies. And we started to work with this banker. And one of the first questions they asked us was actually like, how much runway do you have? Like, how long can you kind of like stretch out your operating life? And so we had about, call it like a year and a half of runway left. And we decided we weren't going to go try to keep going, try to go back to the well and raise another round. We weren't really passionate anymore. We just wanted to kind of like find an exit. So, but we had the runway. And so he said, okay, look, like you have a year and a half of runway. That's like a pretty good amount of time. If you want to maximize your kind of ability to exit, or call it if you want to maximize the amount you exit for, the recommendation is to try to find a very strong strategic partnership with someone first, kind of prove out some kind of shared win that you can achieve with during that partnership, where they kind of like depend on you for a significant portion of whatever it is, product that you're delivering, or value you're delivering. And then you have some leverage in terms of like the price, when it gets to kind of like the buyout table, right? When those discussions start. And so we started to look for, and he used some examples of the past of companies he's sold and how those things ended up playing out, and where did they kind of get those leverage points in discussions for acquisition. And so we started to look for these kind of partnership opportunities that we could find. Of course, Verizon was one of them, just because we already had like this product distributed across their devices. And there was some other drama that derailed that one. But fundamentally, we were trying to look for, like some kind of strategic alignment with a partner to build some new product with them and then parlay that into an acquisition that was going to be a full acquisition and favorable. But we also needed to hedge. So like we didn't know if we would get that partnership in a year's time. So we started to have these acquihire conversations that were purely like, we're going to just talk about talent, right? We're not going to sell the distribution we have. We're not going to sell the technology that we have. We're primarily just going to like try to sell the team.
And was that also through the banker, those acquihire conversations?
Those are separate. Those are
Got
like
you.
me going to friends and being like, hey, I have a friend at Robinhood, or hey, I have a friend at Uber, et cetera. One thing that I will say though about kind of going and starting those conversations is we did figure that even though we were looking for an acquihire in as the context for those combos, one thing we did realize is that we have potentially, we could get more value for the company if we can also sell them not just the talent, but the technology. And then distribution is kind of like a distant third. Like, I mean, our distribution is kind of locked into the product that we were delivering. And also because half of our usage was through like this Verizon channel, like that's a very specific distribution channel that not the vast majority of people might want to pay for.
By the way, for just to interrupt for a second, like it makes a lot of sense to go that way because you think about anything you're selling, you want to sell from a position of strength, right? So the partnership piece makes sense because you're trying to create win-wins. You're not going in there and saying like, listen, I'm going to fail, please buy me, which is, the worst thing you can do. You're saying, hey, we got this thing, like, do you want a partner? So it's a position of strength. So that makes sense. The acquihire may not seem at first blush, but it is a position of strength. You're going in there saying, look, like, yeah, the product market fit didn't work. Yeah, we didn't get crazy traction, but the people we have are top-notch, stellar. Like, they're all going to get great jobs. That's not a problem. It's just,
correct.
We'd rather all keep working together as a group, and maybe we can do it here. And that actually is a position of strength, more so than selling technology, because selling technology, the first question would be, well, if it's so good, why aren't people buying it, right? If it's so good, why don't you have crazy customers, right? Whereas you go with the acquihire, and if they're interested, oh, by the way, we also have this tech, and now you maybe craft a story that gets you, something more.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we kind of looked at it in this way where first level of what we were going to try to sell was this really talented team. Like it was only 13 of us or 11 by the time we sold, but the team was pretty strong. And so from a just kind of like builders, product, technology, able to build, able to kind of move quickly on stuff and ship things, team was strong. That was the first kind of value proposition, right? Second thing was we had built a pretty sophisticated machine learning model for recommending content. So that was like the second kind of like thing that we could use to amp up how much we could sell the company for. And then of course we had a lot of users, but in a very kind of a specific distribution channel. And it would be like a call option maybe if like the company, bought us, that they could maybe potentially tap into that distribution channel. And so we talked to a few companies. We talked to like Coinbase. We talked to Uber. We talked to Robinhood. There were a couple other ones as well. We had been talking to this company they were Pocket, but they had been acquired by Mozilla. So we were talking to them too. And that was more of the partnership kind of angle, strategic partnership angle. But we ended up getting an offer from Coinbase. We got an offer from Uber. We did not get an offer from Robinhood. And so what was super interesting about these offers is the Coinbase one was really interesting in particular because they were like, well, we can see that we might use the technology. We might want to like surface crypto news, but it's kind of a stretch and we're not really sure if we can value it. And we're not really confident that how much of a premium we should pay just for like this news recommendation stuff that we're not really even sure is a core part of what we do in our product. It's kind of a peripheral feature. They weren't as interested in the technology. And even Robinhood was similar when we were trying to talk about news and in the market, like we can recommend, financial related news and stocks and all this stuff. Anyway, but Coinbase was like, they interviewed the whole team and then they were like, we actually only want 5 of you.
Oh yeah, that's the deadly part of the acquihire.
And when I was at Twitter, actually, I used to be on the other side of the table here. I was doing diligence on acquisitions we would do on the engineers on a team. And this came up all the time. It's like, no, we want this person, but not this person. It's kind of a savage thing, to be honest. And like when I was on the side of doing the acquiring or being part of the diligence team, I didn't feel how hard it is because I'm the one like.
Because from your perspective, you're recruiting. You're like, well, why? I don't really like. I mean, I take what I want, like whatever. But yeah, on the other side, you got to tell half your team you're not good enough. That's
on
tough.
the other side. Yeah, it definitely is really tough. And so for that reason that they didn't want to buy all of us and bring the whole team over, we actually said no to that acquisition. And in the end, if you look at like Coinbase's stock performance and you look at the offers that my co-founder and me and 3 other people at the company got, it would have been like way more of a lucrative decision, like,
Yeah, that's
like
funny.
8 figures, higher 8 figures kind of decision once you see it all play out. But we didn't go that route because, like, I think ethically, it just didn't feel right to us. These are people we've been working with at the company, like the full team of 11 or whatever that were there. We've been working with them for like 6.5 years with a lot of them. And it just felt wrong to kind of optimize for that outcome. We really wanted to optimize for doing right by the team. And I credit my co-founder, by the way, for this, really holding the line there because I was definitely tempted. I was like, oh man, but like this Coinbase thing is like really cracking, like, maybe we can help find them like rules other places. He's like, no, we're not doing it. And he like really held the line. And so I got to give him full credit there for that. And we're still working together. He's my co-founder now.
That's awesome.
And so along the way, like we were going through these acquihire offers, we had these offers on the table and we were trying to figure out what we wanted to do. Uber wanted to take the whole team. So that was better. And we had been trying to talk to Robinhood. And at Robinhood was the VP of product at the time was Josh Ellman. He was an investor at Greylock and now he's like at Apple running Apple Intelligence. But him and I had worked together at Twitter. And so I knew him from there and he was kind of like our in at Robinhood to talk about acquihire. And then he was also on the board of Medium. And Ev Williams is the founder of Twitter, who I knew from Twitter days, but also the founder of Medium. And so Josh is in the room with Ev and he's like, yo, dude, you know what Russ is up to now? Like actually he's working on this machine learning based news recommendation thing. And what came up in that board meeting that day was, oh, we should get more potentially into the news space and working with publications. And we should like have more. Right now, all of our recommendations of content on Medium are purely human curated. We don't do any AI type of stuff. And so he was like, yeah, you should talk to Russ, man. He's working on all this stuff. And so Ev and I met, we caught up after probably about a decade of, maybe like 8 years of since we had talked last and, just caught up, hung out, had a good time. And I think one thing led to another. It led to many more conversations across that time, but he ended up being interested in, of course, a team because we delivered the product there and leveraging us to do that for Medium. He could value the technology because this is like aligned with their product roadmap. And then the distribution channel, what was interesting about that is he could value that too and do a proper acquisition because Twitter and Facebook had like this like stranglehold on distribution. And so he was like thinking about how do I, Medium is popular in its own right, but he was like looking for alternative ways to kind of amp up distribution because of like these hub destinations for content that have manifested over the last 20 years. And so he kind of was able to do a full acquisition. Another kind of backroom kind of story that was surprising for me during that process that might be helpful for the listeners is that like when we started to look for acquisition and like acquihire was kind of the default path for us, our investors were like, oh yeah, go do whatever you want. Like they kind of like wrote it off. They were like, it's like it's already a zero for us. So like, yeah, do whatever makes sense for you guys. Like, and I'm like, all right, cool. I appreciate that about you investors, board. And then as soon as it ended up becoming a real acquisition and they could actually get their money back, suddenly it's like blood in the water. And then they're weighing in and like trying to like optimize the deal terms for what gets extracted out on the front end versus like any kind of retention bonuses for the team and all the people coming over. And so my co-founder and I, we kind of said, okay, here's how we're going to play this. It's like the right thing to do. Like, first of all, they wrote us off, right? They did give us their money. So, that's not lost on us. They took a bet on us and we appreciate that and value that. So we do feel a sense of duty to try to get them back as much as possible. But the thing that Ev is acquiring, it's like he's acquiring like the team. He's acquiring the technology. It's the team that built the technology that maintains and improves the technology. It's like, so there's so much value locked in the team. And the investors were here trying to like rip out some of that value and move the pendulum farther over to like them getting a return for something they wrote off already. And so it just felt wrong. And the way we played this was good cop, bad cop. DZ, my co-founder, would basically talk to the investors and like negotiate with them and then say like, you know what, Russ is just not willing to do this. This term, Russ is not willing to. I can't get him to. They're like, can we talk to Russ? He's like, no, he doesn't want to talk to you guys. And they kind of like, he torched me a little bit, but like we planned that that's how it was going to work. I'm like, all right, I'll just be the bad guy here.
You need that. I mean, the only other bad guy that sometimes solo founders have to use is just the acquirer, right? It's like, listen, the acquirer doesn't give a shit about you guys. Like they want to buy us.
Yeah.
So transferring economics from us to you is dead weight loss to them. Right. So it's like,
And just to be clear, it wasn't money for me or DZ. It was money for the team. And I'm like, look, like this acquisition would literally not happen if the team doesn't come along and is happy and like delivers results. Like all of this stuff is like codified in retention as well. They have to deliver results. There are like these metrics we have to hit. So, just kind of like keep that in mind. And so this is how we played it, and the acquisition closed, and it ended up being like a full acquisition. And I'm not going to say it was like a massive acquisition or anything like that, but I think it was definitely a better outcome than any of us hoped for. And yeah, it was an interesting learning experience on selling a company.
yeah, that's a huge learning. And what comes out of that to me is, especially for the acquihire, is just the importance of relationships. It's so cliche, but at the end of the day, you look at all your meetings, they were like you knew someone somewhere that then started that thing up. And if you don't have that, you have to find a way to build that. Otherwise, this option is frankly not available to you. Like it's not like you can email corp dev at Uber and be like, hey, we're 10 engineers. Like, do you guys want to buy us? It's not going to happen.
In all situations where a company is sold, not bought, it's almost purely relationship driven, in my opinion. Like, you got to have a connection to someone, and someone's going to kind of like help do you a favor. Like, are you calling a favor? I remember this story that Ron Conway told me about. I won't name who the companies were, but Ron Conway told me that like there was at the time, a fairly well-known company that was on the ropes and like almost out of money. And he literally like called another company and said, hey, remember that thing I did for you? You got to return the favor. You got to buy these guys. And they went and they did it. They like bought the company for Ron Conway.
Crazy.
He like made the strong arm them into doing it. It's like, it is pretty wild, like how those connections matter in the kind of like the downside case. The upside case, when a company is bought, like then it's like kind of all gravy.
So post acquisition, you stayed Medium for like about 2 years, and then you start LiveKit in early 2021. What was the original idea for LiveKit, and why did you go out and want to do another one?
Yeah, so the LiveKit started, it's the first thing I've ever done that sort of happened organically without intentionally trying to start a company. First time ever. The previous 4, I've always been trying to start a company, trying to be like my dad, and they never worked out. But LiveKit in particular, so we had sold to Medium, and it was 6 months before the pandemic. I think our acquisition was July 4th, 2019. And celebrate America, celebrate, selling the company. And then pandemic hits. Suddenly, everyone's like at home and can only connect with each other over the internet. And you're using Zoom, Discord, and Google Meet. And the reason you're using those apps is because they were built for video and audio streaming at scale. That's the reason you use those apps in particular. The rest of the internet, though, wasn't actually built for that purpose. Whenever you type in HTTP into your browser address bar, that stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It's a protocol for transferring text over a network. But pandemic hits, you can't go anywhere. You need to use your webcam and your microphone to talk to other people. Well, that's voice and that's video. And you actually need a different protocol to do that. One that had been operating in obscurity until the pandemic hit. That protocol is called WebRTC. And if you were to guess, what is the protocol that Google Meet and Zoom and Discord use? Well, it's WebRTC under the hood. That protocol is quite difficult to scale. You need a lot of infrastructure you have to build around it to scale. And so Zoom had built all that infrastructure over a 10-year period, and Discord had been working on their stack for 10 years, and Google Meet similar. If you were a developer trying to integrate real-time audio and video streaming into your app, I was working on an app at that time as a side project while I was at Medium. I was working on a clubhouse for companies to use, during the pandemic, drop-in audio conversations for companies. I needed audio and video streaming. So I started to look around for infrastructure to help me do it. And it turns out that like all this stuff that Zoom does under the hood, it's locked within the Zoom app at the application layer. There's really nothing at the API layer that made it possible or easy for a developer to do. And so I started to work on my own stack. And DZ, my old co-founder from Evie, better engineer than I am, I said, hey, I need help on this stack. Can you help me work on it? So we started to work on it together. My Clubhouse for Companies idea ended up not having legs. I tried it with a few design partners. They weren't really using it that much, and found out it was like there were different jobs to be done than what I had originally imagined. I thought I could just pattern match from Clubhouse to enterprise version of Clubhouse and it would just work. And it turns out that didn't work. But some friends said to me, hey, like that stack that you had built to power your Clubhouse for Companies, can I use it too? So we made a GitHub repo kind of casually. We started a Slack instance, invited them in so they could give us some feedback on it, how to make it better. If they had any bugs that they ran into, we could fix it for them. And then slowly over like a month, 2, 3 months, all these like people I'd never met before were getting invited into the Slack channel. And I'm like, okay, it's kind of weird. And like they're starting to say like, hey, do you have a React Native SDK? Hey, do you have can you fix the plug? And we're like, oh, okay, it's kind of odd. This is like starting to take on a life of its own. And so we said, well, you know what? Like, we don't have an idea yet for another company. We're at Medium, kind of like working here, trying to make things work and, treat Ev well for acquiring the company and ship some products. So in our like nights and weekends, we would just like work on this audio video infrastructure stack.
And this was what, mid 2021 at this point?
This was actually like right at the end. This part where it's like, it's starting to kind of snowball a little bit is at the end of 2020. And so we still haven't left Medium yet. And then 3 to 4 months later, it feels like it hit this inflection point where like every day there were new people coming into this Slack channel. And we're like, all right, well, this is like kind of becoming like it could be like a real open source project. And developers are struggling with how to build this stuff, like for themselves, all this kind of infrastructure. It's a pretty hard problem. So why don't we just like leave and focus on working on this open source thing until the next startup idea comes to us? So we like figured it would be like a crypto wallet or something. We were feeling maybe bitter about passing on Coinbase when the IPO happened. But like, yeah, so like we ended up leaving Medium and starting to work on LiveKit proper as like an open source project. So we launched it 2021 summer and it just exploded. Like the day that we put out the first release in open source, it wasn't a company. It was just me, DZ, and our kind of who is now our first employee at the time, just, a contributor that we knew from Evie, actually, one of our old Evie employees. It was just 3 of us in this open source project. And then like a public company comes in and tries to acquire us like immediately. It wasn't even a company. I'm like, what are you guys acquiring? You guys buying the repo or? And so then like in the first 2 weeks, it was like trending across all of GitHub, top 10 repo across every language, and Spotify and Oracle and Reddit and X and these like large companies were starting to deploy it and start the repo. And we're like, what's going on here? So we started to talk to them and we had like meetings with them and we're like, why are you using it? That was like our primary question. There's commercial things out there like Twilio and stuff like that, super expensive stuff, but like why LiveKit? What they said was like, hey, we can see your code and you guys designed a really great system like this server and client and the interplay between the two. It's like a really great API design. We can deploy it and we can kind of control our own destiny to a degree.
We have tens of thousands of people who have followed the show. Are you one of those people? You want to be a part of the group. You want to be a part of those tens of thousands of followers. So hit the follow button.
And what were some of the use cases that, X or Spotify were using it for?
So for Spotify, what they were exploring, and they still use for this today, but like they were exploring building kind of like live concerts using LiveKit. So being able to have like an artist, go up there and like do kind of half talk show, half live concert, or play some pre-release stuff that they're working on like for their closest fans. So that was like the Spotify use case. Oracle's was crazy. That was like a Cybertruck police drone. They use this today too for a bunch of different initiatives, but that was like the first one that they had an idea for. It was like, I don't even know if the Cybertruck was out at that time, but they were like trying to build these like police drones using Tesla vehicles and
crazy.
It's pretty wild. They do a lot of stuff with the government and military as well. X was looking at Twitter Spaces, and then there was Reddit, who was trying to use us for Reddit Talk. Reddit uses for some other stuff now today, not Reddit Talk. Reddit Talk ended up getting shuttered and shut down post kind of coming out of the pandemic a couple of years later. But Reddit Talk was what they were exploring to use us for initially. So we were talking to them, and like, when I say these use cases, like Reddit Talk, Spotify stuff, Twitter Spaces, like these are all like really massive scale kind of like use cases. The communities on these applications are huge. And so what they said to us commensurately was like, hey, none of the providers, even on the commercial side, can do massive scale. None of them can do the lowest latency possible through an edge network. All of them are single server systems where they put the server somewhere in the world and everyone has to connect, regardless of how far away they are, to that server over the public internet, which is slower than the private fiber connectivity between all of the different data center providers. Nobody has an edge network. Nobody can do massive scale and just horizontally scale up servers infinitely. And nobody can deliver 5 nines of reliability. So like if a server falls over, or if an entire region of a cloud provider goes down, or even if the cloud provider itself across every region goes down, how do you make sure that this is like almost like a public utility where you just can fail over and still provide, high quality of service via another data center or another region or another cloud provider? And so they said, like, look, you have this single server system with SDKs in open source, but we don't really want to have to figure out how to solve the reliability, latency, and scale of a global network. If you guys figure out a way to take your server and turn it into this like multi-server system where you can put them all around the world and they kind of intercommunicate and form this single gigantic like mesh network of WebRTC servers, almost like one big distributed WebRTC server, we would happily like pay you for that as a commercial product. So that's when we raised a round, our first seed round from Redpoint. And
How much did you raise in that round?
we raised $7 million for that round.
And this was still a lot of COVID era use cases.
Yeah, COVID era use cases. Like, another example here, like within the first 3 weeks, there was a company that started to go and deploy us in all of the dispatch centers around the US for 911 emergency.
Okay.
So that company was called Prepared. They actually sold to Axon, and now we operate the same thing, but via Axon now, where LiveKit is run in these dispatch centers. And so when you call 911 for about 35 or so % of the calls, that's actually going through LiveKit infrastructure, and the dispatch agent can talk to you. And this is a human here. When I say agent, human dispatch agent can talk to you. You can stream video to it. You stream your audio, you stream GPS data, all this situational data that helps the agent understand better about what the situation is that's going on and how to best help you. Now what's happening is they're actually integrating a LiveKit agent into that workflow where the agent can do things like figure out, oh, okay, firefighters need to get looped in, and they can like dispatch out to firefighters and bring them in automatically. Does stuff like gun detection and license plate reading. And so that information gets forwarded to like FBI field offices. And so there's all kinds of cool stuff that AI agent is doing together as a co-pilot with the human dispatch agent in this 911 call. Anyway, but that whole effort started very quickly after we launched the first open source release. So the use cases here were the 911 one is kind of like public service or law enforcement kind of government related use case. But yeah, it was like live streaming and video conferencing was really where the concentration was around what we were providing with our initial kind of release of LiveKit. I should say video conferencing for the open source release, because video conferences didn't need to have like 10,000, 100,000 people in them. But then when we launched LiveKit Cloud, we raised that round and we started to work on this thing that these large companies asked us for, this commercial global network for streaming media. That's when we launched that thing at the end of 2022 is when live streaming suddenly using WebRTC became a thing, became viable. All the like stuff that powers Twitch and YouTube Live and things prior to something like LiveKit Cloud existing is using like a different protocol, a different technology, a legacy technology that actually isn't even truly live streamed.
Are those big companies like Twitch, YouTube, are they relying on your product, or they have their own stacks? So I guess because my big question is a lot of these use cases, like the kind of who I would think would use this would be the new apps that are now powering new use cases around live streaming and whatever, and they don't want to build their own from scratch versus a really big like Twitch and YouTube that have been there for a long time. But a lot of that wave, like 2020, 21, early 22, was really hot, and then by the time that you've got this thing, the COVID era stuff like falls, remote is like falling. Like, is that affecting you guys? How is that playing out inside LiveKit?
We hadn't felt the effects, like the negative effects of it, because I think two things were happening. One, well, I'll explain kind of why we hadn't really felt the negative effects, because something shifted fundamentally at the end of 2022. Well, and really when it shifted was at mid 2023, which I'll get to. like the entire company charter changed, but it changed in such a way that it layered in this new phase of growth as maybe some of the COVID era stuff was tapering off. So we didn't feel the taper off because we were kind of all in on this new kind of wave of growth and a new use case. I'm not trying to be like purposely vague. We'll talk about it in a sec, but like you're right that like net new live streaming kind of companies in certain niches were starting to use us. So like Whatnot for live shopping is an example of this. And they're still like a top 20 app in the App Store. And Pump.fun, we power Pump.fun, which is that's a whole nother can of worms. Like,
Nice.
but yeah, like that's kind of a net new live streaming use case, right? That has kind of cropped up and really hit scale. And so end of 2022, we launched LiveKit Cloud. We're powering now all these live streaming kind of use cases in these niche categories and video conferencing use cases. And then ChatGPT comes out and GPT-2 sucked so badly.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, like you use this app that wraps GPT 3.5 and you're like, holy crap, like this is like a crazy jump, right? And I'm like, wow, I'm texting with the human, with my friend, but it's a computer. What if I took like LiveKit stuff, WebRTC technology, and I like pair it with ChatGPT? What if I could like build a demo? It would be pretty cool to build a demo of a computer that felt like a human, but instead of you texting with it, you're talking to it.
I see.
So I built this demo pairing kind of our technology and GPT together, tweeted it out, and I'm like, I'm going viral for sure. My first time ever. I'm so excited for it. And then like barely anybody noticed.
No
And
way.
it wasn't the first demo of this too, like where you were like Samantha from Her.
Like the first like voice AI demo, like before the voice mode.
First voice AI
Wild.
demo, latency was like super, like not super low.
But for then, yeah, it's all about expectations. Now, like the expectations so high, but back then, and just about anything would have been impressive.
Yeah, like the Alexa Siri would take like 10 seconds to respond to you, and this took like 3 seconds, and so it felt like a way more conversational, and it was definitely state of the art for that time. But yeah, nobody like really paid attention to it. It did. I think it got like 90 likes, definitely far from viral. But then what happened was like I said to my co-founder after it totally died, I'm like, man, maybe I should just try to figure out like through the YC network, maybe I should try to figure out how to get to Sam and like just be like, yo, let's build this into ChatGPT. But then I forgot about it. And I'm like still trying to run this live streaming video conferencing business. And
How big was that business at that point? Were you doing millions already ARR?
not that much. We had done about, I think at that time, August 2023 is when we hit $1 million in run rate.
Okay.
And so I would say like we were maybe sitting around 300K or something like that.
Okay. So you had something, but it wasn't like something to protect where it was like, you got this big business you got to worry about.
No,
Okay.
definitely
Gotcha.
not. And then what happened was on that day, I think it was like August 4th, 2023, I got pinged by I won't say it. I won't say who it is, but I got pinged by a hyperscaler and they were like, well, we want to talk about collaboration, like that kind of
Yes.
vague thing. So I went to this like 5-hour long lunch with them and they were like, can we buy you? Can we license or we're going to kill you? They offered us this super lowball offer. And we're like, no. And they're like, well, if you have an AI idea, somehow tied to AI, then like we'll 10x the offer. I'm like, I don't have a way. We're like a live streaming company, video conferencing. I can't.
Oh, God.
Sorry, guys.
Oh, so that hyperscaler came to you for the live streaming stuff, asking if you have it. Okay.
Yeah.
Wild. All right.
Because they want to be cool too. And then I'm like driving home after that long lunch thinking like the hyperscaler is going to kill us. And then I get an email from OpenAI and it's like, hey, so we signed up for a LiveKit Cloud in secret with a personal Gmail address 3 weeks ago. And we've built this voice interface
Holy shit.
ChatGPT like on top of you guys. And now we're like fans and we want to like talk commercial. And so that's like when we started to talk to them. That was kind of the start of all of this thing where it's like, Ben Thompson like calls OpenAI the accidental consumer company
Yes.
because they never meant to create ChatGPT as this
That's
like
right.
fastest product ever. And OpenAI goes and turns LiveKit into the accidental AI company because a lot of people at that time were starting to do this thing where it's like they figure out what their AI angle is and then they pitch it to VCs and like
Yeah. It was like 9 months after the ChatGPT moment. That's right. Yes.
we were not trying to do that. We were like, this is a live streaming video conferencing company and
We got our lane, which is actually funny, given that you guys weren't at many millions in ARR, that you were thinking that way versus like trying to
yeah.
throw AI on top of whatever.
Totally. And then when the OpenAI thing happened, right, suddenly it was like, oh, wait, this company could be much, not bigger in terms of like dollar value, just like the impact that we could have on the world could be much bigger. Like we should change lanes. Like kind of what we're going after. We could build probably a healthy business on it, but here we have an opportunity to build kind of like a generational infrastructure company. At the time when OpenAI first started to work with us, we were network infrastructure, and it was like, okay, OpenAI is building the brain. They're building a human-like computer. That's AGI, right? That brain needs to be able to like get signals that go into the brain and then like signals that come out of the brain, right? Like when the computer speaks, you got to be able to carry that signal back to wherever it needs to go. And when the AI needs to see and hear, you got to carry that signal from the source and to the model. And so we can build the nervous system for AI here, right? This network infrastructure, the backbone for multimodal AI. And then there was this other realization that happened. Like, so we were super excited about the backbone part. Like, that was awesome. And we were like, all right, we're going to pivot the whole company to this and all of this stuff. And the unique thing here was that WebRTC, that protocol for streaming audio and video, it was designed for client devices. It was not designed to run on a server program. So what that means is like it's designed for you and me to connect to one another peer to peer and stream audio and video directly to one another from our devices, which have cameras and microphones built into them. It's what we're doing now. There is a server in the middle, but it's fundamentally what we're doing is client to client. But what OpenAI was doing with ChatGPT voice mode is they had a server program. Think of it like, you have your Next.js backend. It's a new type of backend, an agent, a voice agent that is consuming audio from the user streaming in from their phone, acting like it's another phone. It's streaming into that computer program. The computer program is then going and orchestrating these models, converting it into text, the speech, and then running it through an LLM, and then taking the tokens and converting that back into speech, those text tokens, and then streaming it back out to the user. And so there's some orchestration you got to do there. There's like interruption handling and understanding when is the user done speaking so the AI can start to process what it said, what the user said. There's like orchestration. There's the core WebRTC streaming over the network you got to handle. Anyway, so we built a bunch of stuff for OpenAI to be able to do this. And then we said, you know what? People are probably going to want to do the same thing. Like lots of developers are going to want to build all these voice AI. It wasn't called that at the time. Applications.
Insane timing. It's crazy timing. Yeah.
Super lucky. And I feel like it's like unheard of luck,
Well, because you can be like too early, too late, whatever. And this is like just as that wave is about to come because the first company's like OpenAI is going to do it. And then, others are definitely about to follow like in spades.
I think like to win the game, you got to be in the game. And I think I was just hanging around the rim for a long time. Me and DC were. And so it finally happened, like that kind of stars aligned. But anyway, so like we turned it into a framework, kind of like our version of Next.js. We put it out there and we're like, all right, developers, like voice mode launched. Here's how you can build the same thing. You take our framework, you build the thing, and then you can run the thing on our network. But what was really interesting is that right when voice mode launched, right before it launched, we hadn't put out the framework yet, but we were about to put it out. OpenAI like put this meeting on our calendar, and we go into this meeting and they're like, so how do we scale this thing? How do we like deploy and scale these voice agents? I'm like, no joke. My answer was, you're OpenAI. Why are you asking me? And you guys are like the best. And they're like, well, we just want to kind of understand best practices because it's a bit different than what we are used to doing. Like ChatGPT is a web app fundamentally, or it's built on top of HTTP. This is built on top of WebRTC. It's a different protocol. And one thing to know about HTTP is that HTTP is like a stateless protocol. What that means is that like you don't have any context that is building up across requests. Every request is independent. But with a voice conversation, like we're having a conversation that has been building up over an hour. And so, every time I say something and then you process what I said and then say something back, we're not like ending the call and then going back into a call when I say the next thing. It's like, this is a stateful interaction where you're building up context over time and you're connected for an hour or 30 minutes.
And in ChatGPT, they're faking that by just like every time you send a message, they're resending the whole message, like the whole chat.
Exactly. They're faking it. It doesn't matter per text because you're used to a text conversation. Text conversations are not real time. Like
you got the time to read it and then time to write it. And yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's like you can wait 5 seconds before the AI responds. Like that's kind of baked into the user experience. But for a voice conversation, if you're trying to build an AI that talks to you just like a human, imagine if I say something and then like it takes like 10 seconds for you to respond, or you say something back and then like I say something else and then it takes like 10 seconds for you to hear it. That just breaks kind of like your expectation of how experience is supposed to be. But here's what's crazy is that like this thing that we did with OpenAI for ChatGPT, it's like this iceberg where stateless to stateful, suddenly all the infrastructure to support an application that looks like that is completely different. And it's like, we're not just talking about the framework. We're not just talking about the protocol for transferring over the network. We're talking about how do you deploy an application like that? Because instead of having a bunch of web servers and you just go like request, round robin across these web servers, because every request roughly takes the same amount of time. And so you can just like round robin across them for load balancing. Suddenly, like a request comes in, that's a session that might take 30 seconds. And another request comes in and that's a session that might take an hour. The way I think about it is like multiplayer video games. Like when you play Fortnite, one Fortnite game might take 5 minutes and you'll win. And then somebody else is in a Fortnite session that it might take 30 minutes for somebody to win. And so load balancing a multiplayer video game is very different from load balancing a web application. And so we had told OpenAI, like, here's how we have done it in the past and how we recommend doing it. Then we started to work on a deployment stack. So if you think of like the agents framework as our Next.js, now we're working on the Vercel piece. So you can build your agent, you can deploy your agent to LiveKit's cloud. We will spin it up all around the world. We will manage where that agent is and where the user is and how they're connected and all the latency between them. And then when they're done talking, like spin them back down and put them back into the pool to wait for the next session. Or if that agent gets disconnected somehow, transferring all the context and everything and resuming somewhere else with failover. So we manage the whole process for you.
And do you compete with like a VAPI, for example, or they sit on top of you?
So VAPI and like Blend and Retail and some of these, most of them actually are built on top of LiveKit. And so they use our infrastructure for all of the transport. Then they have their own infrastructure for orchestration and like they do their own deployment thing and all of that. But I think the key differentiator there, they are using our underlying transport, but like the key differentiation is that like they kind of come in at a layer above on the abstraction level. So like they're lower code, and where they have an advantage or where they deliver a better experience to some cohort of people is that the time to market is very quick. You click some buttons and you put in a system prompt and you click go and you're off to the races. LiveKit is more of a high code solution where you need finer grained control and like how is this agent going to act? And I think of it personally as like Webflow versus like Next.js and Vercel. They both are solid businesses and they address a different segment of customer. But my personal opinion is that eventually you need to go to code. Eventually, if you have like 10 people that all come into a low code solution and through clicking some buttons and getting a system prompt together, have like a viable product, eventually those folks are all going to compete with each other. The barrier to entry for competitors is lower. You have to differentiate. You have to have more control to differentiate, right? And so more control than like a UI can give you. And so that's kind of where I draw the distinction between some of the local platforms versus what LiveKit offers.
And then, with ChatGPT, did you end up getting a deal done and you ended up powering their voice mode, or how did that kind of all end up?
Yeah, we've been powering it for like 3 years.
Wild.
But the scale has been insane there. And
it's got to be crazy.
And I have stories about that too, like, them flipping the switch on stuff, and full credit to the team. Our stuff just scaled. It like scaled to the moon. Like we didn't have downtime, no outages. Like we didn't struggle at all.
Question for you, like when you have a customer like OpenAI, is everything else irrelevant? Do you know what I mean? Like it's such a big behemoth. Do you have other customers that sum up to some percentage of that together? Or is it just like...
Yeah, well, I would say a couple of things. One, like in terms of customer satisfaction or happiness, they kind of overshadow a lot of the customers in that like you care a lot about them having a good experience for sure, because, they're a really strong engineering team and they're operating at a really large scale, and them being happy with the product you provide them, like that satisfaction like makes its way out to other customers who are interested in your stack and are like, oh, well, if you're good enough for OpenAI, then you're good enough for me. And that actually has been like with large enterprises, we've had conversations where the first thing is like, okay, so who do you guys power? This was in the early days. I think a lot of people know we power this now, but in the early days, a Salesforce came to me and they were like, so first question, who do you guys work with? Who do you guys power? Like, can you handle our scale? I'm like, oh, well, we power ChatGPT. They're like, all right, Next question.
Done. Yeah. Like, and that probably takes care of a lot of questions. Like, okay.
To that degree, like OpenAI definitely matters a lot. But I think like the product that OpenAI is building with like voice mode, it's a consumer product and like it's also like a peripheral feature of ChatGPT. Like ChatGPT opens up to text. It's like only a segment of, and it's not a small segment, but only a segment of ChatGPT users use voice mode on a regular basis. And so, but if you think about this, like in aggregate, where today, here and now, is the large majority of voice traffic? Well, it's in telephony, right? There are a trillion phone calls happening around the world every single day. And billions of those calls have some kind of B2B workflow or process that the caller and the person answering the phone are trying to navigate together. It's a human these days, but like the human is the person answering the phone. And so what we've seen is this flood of people that are trying to take AI, build these agents that actually answer phones instead of humans answering them, maybe for frontline, maybe for to facilitate the entire workflow within a business process. But if you take all of those different pockets of use cases together, it's like several times bigger than like ChatGPT voice mode. So yeah, OpenAI is like a big customer and like has a lot of traffic, but at the same time, like the pie is a lot bigger than that in terms of all the voice workload that is available or has the opportunity to go and put AI into the middle of that.
Perfect. Well, listen, let me stop it there. I'll ask a few kind of quick fire questions. When did you say, you said you hit million ARR? When was that?
That was August of 2023 is when we crossed our first million. Yeah.
And how quickly did growth go? Like after, you don't have to tell me where you're at today, but like just like, the year after that, what did that look like?
Yeah. We started at 0 and then we 3x'd and then 5x'd and then 3x'd again. And yeah, so it's been good.
Epic. When was like the moment when you felt like you'd found true product market fit?
Oh my gosh. This is like a crazy question because up until very recently, I had not felt like we had product market fit. And everyone's like yelling at me like, dude, what's wrong with you? This is the thing. Like I've had literally this conversation with people in the past, which is I should have realized that when OpenAI started to use us, that we had product market fit, at least for this AI agents, voice AI use case. But I think like as a founder and as an engineer and like as also someone who's come from like the consumer product world in my past, that's where I spent most of my time like in my 20s. You're also taught at like Y Combinator that, to a degree that like product market fit is this elusive thing. And it's like very hard to know when you have it and when you don't. And sometimes like there are red herrings that can kind of give you this indication that you have it when you really don't. And so I kind of like always assumed, I took more of a pessimistic view in that like, we don't have product market fit yet. We don't have product market fit yet. And maybe I sort of drew my comparison points incorrectly where I'm like looking at something like Cursor.
That's BMF. Yeah. Tough bar.
Product market fit is a spectrum. It's not a binary thing. And we do actually have very strong product market fit. I would say that the moment we had it was with OpenAI, becoming our design partner for voice AI. But the moment I realized it wasn't until maybe like 4 months ago, as crazy as that sounds.
And then last question, what would be like your number one piece of advice for an early stage founder that's still looking for product market fit?
I would say that it kind of ties into something I said earlier. You got to be in it to win it, or you got to be in the game to win the game. Is you have to be around the rim. And the extra step there is which rim you choose. If like rims are markets, like I think choosing the right market is super important, right? Like I think if you haven't found product market fit, you've built a product and there's a market you're in, right? Like, and if you're still searching for it, well, the first step, in my opinion, is look at the market that you're in and try to assess the potential of that market. Let me just use voice AI as an example. Voice interfaces to computers, not that I'm trying to invite more competition, but, in earnest trying to do right by founders is like voice AI, voice interfaces to computers is very nascent. Like we're still in this text mode. Most of the internet is still built around text. And that is going to shift in a huge way over the next 5 to 10 years as the models become smarter and more human-like. You interact with them in more human-like ways, like voice, right, is the primary way we interact with each other. So it's going to be that way with a computer in 5 to 10 years. But, there's a lot of opportunity. It's a big market and it's nascent. And so put yourself in a space where the market is really big, where there's a ton of opportunity, and then be nimble with the product. Be willing to try something, get rid of it if it's not the right thing. Try something else that is kind of an educated guess as to what's going to resonate, and then get rid of it if it's not the right thing, and sort of iteratively move your way through the market as the maze until you find the thing that really hits. That would be my advice for trying to find product market fit, is like picking the right market is actually much more important than building the right product in that market on your first try. You can iteratively build the right product, but very hard to iterate your way to a market. You have to like kind of pick that right.
Perfect. Well, Russ, thanks so much for sharing your story, man. It's been awesome.
Thanks, Pablo. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Wow, what an episode. You're probably in awe. You're in absolute shock. You're like, that helped me so much. So guess what? Now it's your turn to help someone else. Share the episode in the WhatsApp group you have with founders. Share it on that Slack channel. Send it to your founder friends and help them out. Trust me, they will love you for it.